Nothing prepares you for finding out your wife is a liar at 3 in the morning while you're elbow deep in your truck's engine. The wrench slipped, scraped my knuckles raw, and that's when I heard voices drifting through our kitchen window. My wife Jillian arguing with our 17-year-old son Tyler about pills. "Mom, you're taking more medication than your own patients." Tyler's voice carried the particular brand of teenage disgust reserved for hypocritical parents. "Don't you dare question my doctor," Jillian snapped back, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Dr. Denning knows what's best for my condition." I froze, wrench still in hand. Jillian had been seeing Dr. Miles Denning for what she called severe migraines for the past 6 months. The same 6 months she'd been working late, buying expensive perfume, and taking mysterious phone calls at all hours. "My name is Callum Torvin, and I've spent the last 15 years building a construction business from nothing, while my wife climbed the ladder at Mercy General Hospital. She's the administrator who makes decisions. I'm the guy who fixes things when they break. Tonight, I was about to discover just how much needed fixing. I wiped my hands on an old rag and walked toward the house, boots crunching on gravel. Through the window, I could see Jillian in her silk pajamas, the expensive ones she'd bought during her recent shopping spree, clutching a prescription bottle like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Your headaches seem awfully convenient," Tyler muttered, grabbing a soda from the fridge. "That's enough." Jillian's voice dropped to that dangerous whisper she used when she was really angry. "Go to bed, now." Tyler stomped upstairs, and I waited in the shadows until Jillian disappeared into our bedroom. Then I slipped inside and did something I'd never done before. I went through the trash. The pharmacy bag was buried under coffee grounds and yesterday's newspaper. Inside, I found a prescription bottle with Jillian's name, but the medication was something I'd never heard of. The dosage seemed excessive, and the prescribing doctor was, of course, Miles Denning. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything. The label, the pills, even the pharmacy receipt. Then I noticed something else. A handwritten appointment reminder tucked into the bag. Sunday 10 p.m. consultation, MD. Sunday consultations at 10 at night? What kind of doctor sees patients at that hour? The kind who's not really seeing them as patients, a voice in my head whispered. I put everything back exactly where I found it and went to bed, lying next to my wife while she slept peacefully, probably dreaming about her caring, attentive doctor. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, planning my next move. 3 days later, I got my answer. Our home security system, the one I'd installed after a break-in scare last year, showed Jillian leaving the house at 9:47 p.m. on Sunday. She told me she was going to her book club. I followed her in my truck, keeping my distance. She didn't go to any book club. She drove straight to the Bluebird Motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that rents rooms by the hour and doesn't ask questions. Dr. Miles Denning was already there, waiting in his silver BMW like some kind of medical knight in shining armor. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, polished, confident, the kind of man who'd never had grease under his fingernails or worried about making payroll. I watched them embrace in the parking lot, watched him run his hands through her hair, watched her laugh at something he whispered in her ear. They disappeared into room 12, and I sat in my truck for 2 hours, feeling something cold and calculating settle in my chest. When they finally emerged, disheveled and satisfied, I was ready. I waited until Jillian drove away, then I got out of my truck and walked over to Denning's BMW. The tire iron felt solid in my hand as I methodically punctured all 4 tires, the hissing sound oddly satisfying in the quiet night air. Then I left a note under his windshield wiper. "Wrong prescription for the wrong woman. See you at the next checkup." I was back home before Jillian, pretending to work on my truck again when she pulled into the driveway at 1:30 a.m. She came outside, still glowing from her evening activities. "How's the engine coming along?" she asked, her voice artificially bright. "Just fine," I said, not looking up. "How was book club?" "Oh, same old discussions about romance novels." She laughed, and the sound made my stomach turn. "I'm exhausted. Coming to bed soon?" "In a few minutes." She kissed the top of my head, and I smelled his cologne on her skin. After she went inside, I sat in the darkness, planning. The old Callum would have confronted her, demanded explanations, probably ended up looking like a fool. But something had shifted tonight. Something harder and more dangerous had taken his place. I was still sitting there when Mrs. Halloran from next door appeared at her fence, wearing a bathrobe and a knowing expression. "Saw your truck at the Bluebird tonight, Callum," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone. Neighborhood gossip's perfect over decades of practice. "Does Jillian know you were there?" I looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Let's just say the doctor's making house calls now." Mrs. Halloran's knowing look haunted me for the next 3 days. She had the kind of eyes that missed nothing and the kind of mouth that shared everything. In a town like ours, that combination could be either a weapon or a shield, depending on which side you were on. I decided to find out which side I was on. The next morning, I drove to Big Eddie's boxing gym, a place that had become my sanctuary over the years. Eddie Kowalski had been training fighters since before I was born, and his gym was the kind of place where men came to work out their demons on heavy bags instead of taking them home to their families. "You look like someone ran over your dog," Eddie said when I walked in. He was wrapping the hands of a young fighter, his thick fingers moving with practiced precision. "Worse," I said, pulling on my gloves. "Someone's been playing doctor with my wife." Eddie's hands stopped moving. He looked at me with those sharp eyes that had seen everything twice. "You sure about that?" "Sure enough to start making house calls of my own." "Careful, Callum. Revenge is like boxing. You swing wild, you leave yourself open. Set your feet first. Make your shot count." I spent an hour punishing the heavy bag, working out the rage that had been building since Sunday night. Each punch was for a lie, each combination for a betrayal. By the time I was finished, my knuckles were raw and my head was clear. I had work to do. That afternoon, I called the pharmacy where Jillian filled her prescriptions. I'd done work for the owner, Jim Peterson, a few years back. Renovated his house after a kitchen fire. He remembered me. "Jim, I'm worried about my wife's medication," I said. "She's been acting strange lately, and I'm wondering if there might be some kind of interaction with her other prescriptions." There was a pause. "What other prescriptions?" "The ones Dr. Denning has her on, the migraine medication." Another pause, longer this time. "Callum, I can't discuss specific medications over the phone, but maybe you should come in. We should talk." 20 minutes later, I was standing in Jim's office behind the pharmacy counter. He looked uncomfortable, like a man carrying a secret he didn't want to keep. "I'm glad you called," he said finally. "I've been concerned about some of the prescriptions coming from Dr. Denning's office. The dosages don't match the conditions, and the frequency is unusual." "Unusual how?" "Your wife's supposed migraine medication? It's actually an experimental drug used in clinical trials for anxiety disorders. The dosage he prescribed would be appropriate for someone twice her weight with severe panic attacks." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Are you saying she doesn't need this medication?" "I'm saying the medication she's taking doesn't treat migraines, and based on the refill pattern, she's been getting it for months without any documented medical justification." Jim leaned forward, his voice dropping. "There's something else. Dr. Denning has been prescribing similar medications to other patients. Always women, always unnecessary dosages, always with irregular appointment schedules." "How many other women?" "At least 6 that I've flagged, maybe more." I thanked Jim and left the pharmacy with my head spinning. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. Denning was running some kind of operation, using his medical license to cover up whatever he was really doing with these women. That evening, I watched Jillian carefully. She seemed nervous, checking her phone constantly and jumping every time it buzzed. During dinner, she barely touched her food. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just tired. Long day at the hospital." She forced a smile. "Dr. Denning says I need to increase my medication dosage. The migraines are getting worse." "Maybe you should get a second opinion." Her fork clattered against her plate. "I trust Dr. Denning completely. He's been very attentive to my needs." The way she said attentive made my jaw clench. "I'm sure he has." After dinner, I retreated to my home office and did something I'd never thought I'd do. I hacked my wife's phone. Well, hacked is probably too strong a word. I simply tried her birthday, then our anniversary, then Tyler's birthday. The third try opened her messages. What I found there made me want to put my fist through the wall. Dozens of text messages between Jillian and Denning, dating back 8 months. They started professional enough, appointment confirmations, medication adjustments, but they quickly became personal, then intimate, then explicit in ways that made me feel sick. But it was the recent messages that really caught my attention. Denning: "The trial is going perfectly. Your responses to the medication have been exactly what we hoped for." Jillian: "I still feel guilty about not telling the other participants what we're really testing." Denning: "The less they know, the better. Trust me, this research will revolutionize anxiety treatment. Your husband doesn't suspect anything?" Jillian: "Callum's too busy with his little construction projects to notice anything. He thinks I'm just stressed about work." Denning: "Good. We need at least 3 more months of data before we can publish. After that, we can be more open about our relationship." I screenshot everything, then put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From rage so pure and focused it felt like electricity in my veins. Jillian wasn't just cheating on me. She was participating in some kind of illegal drug trial, using other women as unwitting test subjects. And she thought I was too stupid to notice. I spent the rest of the night planning. By morning, I had a list of targets and a timeline for destroying both their lives. The first step was gathering evidence. The second step was making sure everyone who mattered saw it. The third step would be watching their world burn. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I had research to do, and it couldn't wait. I drove to the public library downtown, where the computers were anonymous and the internet history disappeared when you logged off. What I found about Dr. Miles Denning painted a picture of a man who'd built his career on other people's trust and his willingness to betray it. He'd graduated from medical school 15 years ago, middle of his class, nothing special. But he'd been smart enough to specialize in pain management and anxiety disorders, fields where patient symptoms were subjective and treatment could be justified almost indefinitely. His practice had grown rapidly over the past 5 years, particularly his female patient base. He'd published several papers on experimental anxiety treatments, always with glowing results and always with patient identities protected for privacy reasons. I cross-referenced his published research dates with Jillian's prescription history. The timeline matched perfectly. She'd been his test subject from the beginning, and their affair had developed alongside his illegal research. But Jillian wasn't his only victim. Using the names Jim had given me from the pharmacy, I started building a profile of Denning's other patients. They were all women between 30 and 45, all successful professionals, all prescribed medications they didn't need for conditions they didn't have. I printed everything and drove home to find Tyler shooting basketball in our driveway. My son had inherited his mother's intelligence and my stubborn streak, a combination that made him impossible to fool. "Dad, can I ask you something?" he said, catching the ball after a missed shot. "Shoot." "Is Mom having an affair?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut, but I kept my expression neutral. "What makes you ask that?" "She's been acting weird for months. New clothes, new perfume, always on her phone. And those pills she's taking? I looked them up online. They're not for migraines." I studied my son's face. He had his mother's eyes, but my determination. "What did you find out about the pills?" "They're experimental anxiety medication. The side effects include mood swings, increased libido, and something called reduced inhibition. Basically, they're designed to make people more open to suggestion and more willing to take risks." The pieces clicked together in my mind like a puzzle solving itself. Denning wasn't just running illegal drug trials. He was using the medication to manipulate his patients, making them more susceptible to his advances. "Tyler, I need you to promise me something. Don't confront your mother about this. Not yet." "Why not?" "Because I'm going to handle it, but I need time to do it right." That afternoon, I made my first anonymous call to the state medical board. I didn't give them my name, but I gave them everything else. Denning's patient list, the medication discrepancies, the research timeline, and a detailed explanation of how the pieces fit together. The woman who took my call was professional but skeptical. "Sir, these are serious allegations. Do you have documented evidence?" "I'm sending you a package tomorrow with copies of everything. Prescription records, research papers, patient testimonies. You'll have enough evidence to bury him. We'll need to verify all of this independently. An investigation like this could take months." "You don't have months. He's got at least 6 women on this experimental medication right now. Every day you wait, he's collecting more data for his illegal research and manipulating more patients." I hung up and immediately called Jim at the pharmacy. "Jim, it's Callum. I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" "I need you to document every prescription Denning has written in the past year. Dates, dosages, patient names, if you can legally share them. I'm building a case against him." There was a long pause. "Callum, what exactly are you planning?" "I'm planning to make sure he never hurts another woman the way he's hurt my wife." "And your wife? What happens to her in all this?" I looked out the window at Tyler, still shooting baskets, still believing his family was something worth protecting. She made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. That evening, Jillian came home late again, claiming she'd been in a department meeting. She was wearing a new dress I'd never seen before, and her makeup was freshly applied. She kissed me on the cheek, and I smelled his cologne again. "How was your day?" she asked, settling onto the couch beside me. "Productive. I learned some interesting things about experimental drug trials." She went very still. "Oh? What kind of things?" "Did you know that using patients as unknowing test subjects is a federal crime? The FDA takes that kind of thing very seriously." Her laugh sounded forced. That's an oddly specific thing to research. I've been thinking about changing careers, maybe getting into medical consulting. There's good money in exposing doctors who abuse their licenses. She stood up abruptly. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. Sweet dreams, I said. Hope you don't have any more of those migraines. After she left, I opened my laptop and began typing the first of several anonymous emails I planned to send. The hospital board would receive theirs tomorrow morning. The local newspaper would get theirs tomorrow afternoon, and the FDA would get a comprehensive package by the end of the week. But first, I had one more phone call to make. I dialed the number I'd found in Jillian's contacts for her best friend, Lisa Chen, who worked in the hospital's records department. Lisa, this is Callum, Jillian's husband. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Callum, is everything okay? That depends on what you tell me. How long have you known about Jillian and Dr. Denning? The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. Finally, she whispered, How did you find out? Does it matter? What matters is what you're going to do about it. Callum, it's complicated. There are things you don't understand. Then explain them to me. Another pause. Not over the phone. Meet me tomorrow at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street. 1 o'clock. Come alone. She hung up, and I smiled for the first time in days. Tomorrow I'd find out just how deep this conspiracy went, and then I'd start tearing it down, piece by piece. Murphy's Diner was the kind of place where secrets went to hide. Dark booths, thick coffee, and waitresses who'd learned not to listen too carefully to conversations that weren't their business. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a corner booth where I could watch the door. Lisa Chen walked in exactly at 1 o'clock, looking like a woman carrying the weight of the world. She'd always been Jillian's closest friend, the maid of honor at our wedding, the godmother Tyler had never really known. Seeing her now, nervous and guilty, filled in some missing pieces of the puzzle. You look terrible, I said, as she slid into the booth across from me. Thanks. You look like you want to strangle someone. That depends on what you tell me in the next 10 minutes. Lisa ordered coffee she didn't drink and stared at her hands for a long moment. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red-rimmed and defeated. It started 2 years ago, she said. I was going through my divorce and money was tight. Dr. Denning approached me about helping with some research. Nothing illegal, just patient file organization and data entry. What kind of data? Patient responses to experimental medications. He was running trials for a pharmaceutical company, testing new anxiety drugs. The pay was good, and the work seemed legitimate. I waited. There was more coming. About a year ago, things changed. He started asking me to alter patient records to make it look like women had anxiety disorders when they didn't. He said it was necessary to protect the research subject's privacy. And you did it. I needed the money, Callum. My ex-husband had cleaned out our accounts, and I was about to lose my house. Denning was paying me $5,000 a month just to change a few computer entries. When did Jillian get involved? Lisa's face crumpled. 6 months ago. Denning needed someone with administrative authority to authorize the prescriptions and schedule the appointments. And Jillian was perfect. She had access to everything and the authority to make it look legitimate. And the affair? That started later. Denning is persuasive, especially when women are taking his experimental medications. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Are you telling me he drugged my wife into having an affair with him? It's not that simple. The medications don't control behavior, but they lower inhibitions and increase risk-taking. Women taking them are more likely to make impulsive decisions, more likely to trust authority figures, more likely to cheat on their husbands? Lisa nodded miserably. Jillian fought it at first. She knew it was wrong, knew she was putting her marriage at risk, but the medication made everything seem less important, less real. And Denning is very good at making women feel special, feel chosen. I leaned back in the booth, processing this information. My wife hadn't just decided to have an affair. She'd been systematically manipulated by a predator using experimental drugs and psychological manipulation. It should have made me feel better. Instead, it made me angrier. How many other women? 8 that I know of. Maybe more. Denning keeps careful records of everything. Patient responses, behavioral changes, relationship impacts. He's planning to publish a paper on how anxiety medications affect decision-making in professional women. Using my wife and 7 other women as unknowing test subjects. Yes? I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us. I'm going to record the rest of this conversation. You're going to tell me everything, names, dates, bank account numbers, whatever evidence you have. And then you're going to help me destroy him. Lisa stared at the phone like it was a snake. Callum, if this comes out, I'll lose my job. I could go to prison. You should have thought about that before you helped him drug my wife. It wasn't supposed to go this far. The research was supposed to end months ago, but Denning kept extending it. He said the results were too valuable to stop. Start talking. For the next hour, Lisa gave me everything. Names of the other women in the trial, details about how the records were altered, bank account information showing payments from a pharmaceutical company that didn't exist, and most importantly, the location of Denning's research files. He keeps everything in a safe in his home office, she said. Patient files, research data, photographs, video recordings of patient sessions, everything. Video recordings? He told the women it was for medical documentation. But I've seen some of the files, Callum. They're not medical. I turned off the recording and leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me the combination to that safe, and you're going to help me get inside his house. Then you're going to disappear for a week while I decide whether to turn you over to the authorities or let you try to rebuild your life somewhere else. And if I refuse? I showed her the recording app on my phone. Then I send this conversation to the FBI, the medical board, and every news outlet in the state. Your choice. Lisa wrote down an address and a combination on a napkin. Her hands were shaking. Callum, what are you going to do to him? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. I'm going to give him a taste of his own medicine. That evening, I sat in my truck outside Denning's house, a sprawling modern monstrosity in the hills outside town, the kind of place that screamed, I have more money than taste. His BMW was in the driveway, and lights were on in what Lisa had told me was his home office. I was about to become a criminal. The old Callum would have gone to the police, filed reports, trusted the system to handle things properly. But the old Callum hadn't known his wife was being systematically drugged and manipulated by a predator with a medical degree. The new Callum had different ideas about justice. I waited until midnight, then used the garage door code Lisa had given me. Denning's house was as pretentious inside as it was outside, all glass and chrome and expensive art that probably cost more than I made in a year. His office was on the second floor, behind a door that looked like it belonged on a bank vault. The safe was built into the wall behind a painting of some European countryside. The combination Lisa had given me worked on the first try. Inside, I found a treasure trove of evidence that would destroy Denning's life and career. Patient files with detailed notes about how the experimental medications affected each woman's behavior. Photographs of patients in various states of undress taken during medical examinations. Video files with names I recognized, including one labeled Gillian T., Session 12. I didn't watch that one. I couldn't. Instead, I copied everything onto a portable drive and put the originals back exactly where I'd found them. But I did take one thing, a small vial of clear liquid labeled Compound X47, Experimental Batch 23. According to the notes, it was the latest version of the anxiety medication, concentrated and fast-acting. As I left Denning's house, I was already planning how to use it. The next morning brought news that made my coffee taste like victory. Gillian came downstairs looking haggard, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. The hospital board wants to meet with me today, she announced, not quite meeting my eyes. Some kind of routine administrative review. That sounds important, I said, buttering my toast with deliberate calm. Nothing to worry about, I'm sure. She poured coffee with shaking hands. Dr. Denning says it's probably just about budget allocations for next year. You talked to Dr. Denning about it? He called this morning. He's been asked to attend the meeting too. I nodded sympathetically. Well, I'm sure you'll both handle whatever questions they have. After Gillian left for work, I made several phone calls. The first was to the medical board, confirming they'd received my evidence package and were expediting their investigation. The second was to Jim at the pharmacy, asking him to flag any new prescriptions from Denning's office. The third was to a private investigator I'd found online, a former cop named Frank Martinez who specialized in medical malpractice cases. I need surveillance on 2 people, I told Frank. Dr. Miles Denning and my wife, Gillian Torvin. I want to know everywhere they go, everyone they talk to, and everything they do. How long? Until one of them breaks. That afternoon, I drove to Big Eddie's gym and found him training a heavyweight who looked like he could bench press my truck. Eddie took one look at my face and sent the fighter home early. You look like a man about to do something stupid, Eddie said, unwrapping his hands. I look like a man about to do something necessary. I told him everything. The affair, the drug trials, the manipulation, the evidence I'd gathered. Eddie listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. So what's the plan? He asked when I finished. I'm going to destroy him. Professionally, financially, socially. I'm going to take everything he values and turn it to ash. And your wife? She made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Eddie studied me for a long moment. You sure about this path, Callum? Once you start down this road, there's no going back. You won't be the same man when it's over. Good. The man I was let his wife get drugged and manipulated by a predator. The man I'm becoming won't let that slide. That evening, Frank called with his first report. Your wife and the doctor met at the Riverside Hotel downtown. Room 412. They were there for 2 hours. Doing what? Based on the room service orders and the fact that they both looked pretty disheveled when they left, I'd say they weren't discussing medical procedures. What else? The doctor made 3 phone calls while he was there. 2 to lawyers, 1 to someone at the pharmaceutical company funding his research. He looked stressed. Good. Keep watching. The next morning brought more good news. The medical board had launched a formal investigation into Denning's practice, and the hospital had suspended him pending the outcome. Jillian came home early, looking like someone had run over her dog. Miles has been suspended, she announced, collapsing onto the couch. Someone filed a complaint about his prescribing practices. That's terrible, I said, sitting beside her. Do they know who filed the complaint? No, it was anonymous. But whoever it was had detailed information about his patients and their medications. Miles thinks it might be someone from the pharmacy. Well, I'm sure if he's done nothing wrong, he'll be cleared quickly. Jillian looked at me sharply. Of course he's done nothing wrong. Miles is a brilliant doctor. This is just some vindictive person trying to destroy his reputation. Why would someone do that? I don't know. Jealousy, maybe. Or... She trailed off, staring at me with something that might have been suspicion. Or what? Nothing. I'm just upset. Miles has been so good to me, helping with my migraines and everything. I hate to see him being attacked like this. That night, I made my move. I waited until Jillian was asleep. Then I slipped the small vial of compound X47 into her purse, along with a note written in block letters. Stop the research or everyone finds out. The next morning, Jillian found the note and the vial. I watched from the kitchen as she opened her purse, saw the contents, and went white as paper. Callum, she called, her voice shaking. Can you come here for a minute? I found her in the living room, holding the vial like it might explode. What's that? I asked innocently. I don't know. I found it in my purse with this note. She showed me the paper, her hands trembling. That's strange. What do you think it means? I have no idea, but I need to call Miles right away. She dialed Denning's number, and I listened to her side of the conversation with growing satisfaction. Miles, someone put something in my purse. Yes, a vial of some kind of medication and a note about research. I don't know who. What do you mean? How much do they know? There was a long pause while Denning apparently explained something that made Jillian's face go even whiter. You're saying this is the actual medication you've been giving me, but you told me it was just migraine treatment. What do you mean, experimental? Miles, what exactly have you been doing to me? Another pause, then Jillian's voice rose to near hysteria. You've been using me as a test subject? For 8 months? And you didn't tell me? I couldn't hear Denning's response, but whatever he said made Jillian hang up and throw her phone across the room. Then she turned to look at me with eyes full of realization and growing horror. Callum, she whispered, I think I've made a terrible mistake. I sat down beside her and took her shaking hands in mine. Tell me everything, I said gently, and maybe we can figure out how to fix it. For the next hour, Jillian told me about the affair, the medication, and her growing suspicion that Denning had been manipulating her from the beginning. She cried, she apologized, she begged for forgiveness. And I listened to every word, planning the final phase of my revenge. The Mercy General Hospital annual gala was the social event of the year in our town. 500 of the most important people in the county gathered to celebrate medical excellence and raise money for charity. Jillian had been planning it for months, back when she thought she had a career worth celebrating. Now, 3 weeks after her confession, she sat at our kitchen table staring at her invitation like it was a court summons. I can't go, she said for the 10th time. Everyone will be staring at me, whispering about the investigation. You have to go, I replied, adjusting my tie in the hallway mirror. You're still the hospital administrator until the board makes their final decision. Besides, hiding makes you look guilty. I am guilty, Callum. Maybe not of everything Miles did, but I knew something was wrong and I didn't stop it. I turned to face her, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for my wife. The experimental medication was finally out of her system, and she was seeing clearly for the first time in months. The guilt was eating her alive. Get dressed, I said. We're going to face this together. What Jillian didn't know was that I'd been planning this night for weeks. Frank Martinez had helped me set up everything, the audio equipment, the video feeds, the carefully orchestrated sequence of events that would destroy both her and Denning in front of everyone who mattered. The gala was held in the hospital's main conference center, a gleaming space filled with medical equipment displays and pharmaceutical company banners. Jillian and I arrived fashionably late, and I could feel the eyes on us as we made our way to our assigned table. Dr. Denning was already there, looking confident and relaxed despite the ongoing investigation. He'd hired expensive lawyers and was apparently convinced he could weather the storm. When he saw us approaching, he stood and extended his hand to me with a smile that made me want to break his jaw. "Callum, good to see you. I hope you don't believe all these ridiculous rumors about my practice." I shook his hand and smiled back. "Of course not, Doctor. I'm sure everything will be cleared up soon." "Absolutely. These anonymous complaints are always from disgruntled patients or competitors trying to damage reputations. The medical board will see through it." "I'm sure they will." Jillian barely spoke during dinner, picking at her food while Denning held court with the other doctors at our table. He was charming, confident, completely convinced of his own invincibility. Perfect. During the dessert course, the hospital CEO took the podium to give his annual speech about medical excellence and community service. I checked my watch, 8:47 p.m., right on schedule. I excused myself to use the restroom, but instead I made my way to the audio booth where Frank was waiting with a laptop and a knowing smile. "Everything ready?" I asked. "Just say the word." I looked out at the crowd. Doctors, nurses, hospital board members, pharmaceutical executives, local politicians, and journalists. Everyone who mattered in our little medical community was here, dressed in their finest clothes and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. "Do it." Frank hit a button, and the CEO's microphone cut out. A moment of confused silence, then my voice filled the room through the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. My name is Callum Torvin, and I have something important to share with you tonight." I walked back into the main room as every head turned to stare at me. Jillian looked horrified, Denning looked confused, and the crowd murmured with curiosity and annoyance. Many of you know my wife, Jillian Torvin, your hospital administrator, and many of you know Dr. Miles Denning, your respected colleague and researcher. What you don't know is that for the past 8 months, they've been conducting illegal medical experiments on unwitting patients. The murmur turned into a buzz of shocked conversation. Denning stood up, his face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. Security, remove this man immediately." "Sit down, doctor," I said calmly. "We're just getting started." Frank hit another button, and the room's video screens lit up with documents, prescription records, research files, bank statements, and patient testimonies. Everything I'd gathered over the past month, laid out in devastating detail. Dr. Denning has been prescribing experimental anxiety medications to healthy women, telling them they had conditions they didn't have, and using their responses to gather research data for illegal pharmaceutical trials. The crowd was silent now, staring at the screens with growing horror. I could see board members taking notes, journalists recording everything, and pharmaceutical executives reaching for their phones. "But that's not all," I continued. "Dr. Denning has also been using these medications to manipulate his patients, taking advantage of their reduced inhibitions to engage in inappropriate relationships." More documents appeared on the screens, photographs, video files, recorded conversations, nothing explicit, but enough to make the implications crystal clear. Denning was on his feet now, shouting, "This is all fabricated. This man is trying to destroy me because he found out about my relationship with his wife." "You're right about one thing, doctor," I said, walking closer to his table. "I did find out about your relationship with my wife, but what I found out was that you drugged her into having that relationship." I pulled out a small recording device and hit play. Denning's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "The medications don't control behavior, but they lower inhibitions and increase risk-taking. Women taking them are more likely to make impulsive decisions, more likely to trust authority figures." The recording continued for 30 seconds, laying out exactly how Denning had manipulated his patients. When it ended, the silence in the room was deafening. "That recording was made 3 weeks ago," I said. "Dr. Denning was explaining to my wife how he'd been manipulating her and 7 other women for his research." Denning lunged at me then, his composure finally cracking completely. "You destroyed everything. My career, my research, my life, all because you couldn't handle losing your wife to a better man." I caught his swing easily and twisted his arm behind his back. Years of boxing training making the move automatic. "The only thing I couldn't handle," I said quietly, "was watching you poison my wife and call it medicine." Security finally arrived, but instead of removing me, they restrained Denning as he continued to shout threats and denials. The crowd was in chaos now, some people demanding answers, others heading for the exits, journalists frantically taking notes and making calls. I looked across the room at Jillian, who sat frozen at our table with tears streaming down her face. For a moment, I felt something that might have been regret. Then I remembered the video files in Denning's safe, the 8 other women he'd victimized, and the months of lies and manipulation. The regret passed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone one last time, "I apologize for ruining your evening, but sometimes the only way to cure a disease is to expose it to the light." I walked out of the gala as police sirens wailed in the distance, leaving behind the wreckage of 2 careers and 1 marriage. In the parking lot, I lit a cigar and watched through the windows as Denning was led away in handcuffs and Jillian was surrounded by board members demanding explanations. Frank Martinez appeared beside me, grinning. "Hell of a show, Callum. You sure know how to make an exit." "It's not over yet," I said, taking a long drag of my cigar. "This was just the opening act. What's the encore?" I smiled and flicked ash onto the pristine hospital parking lot. "Tomorrow, the real consequences begin." 6 months later, I was sitting in my truck outside the courthouse when Jillian emerged from her final hearing. She looked older, thinner, worn down by months of legal proceedings and public scrutiny. She saw me waiting and walked over slowly, like a woman approaching her own execution. "The board made their decision," she said through my open window. "I'm officially terminated. No severance, no benefits, no references." I heard. "What about the criminal charges?" "Dropped, thanks to my cooperation with the federal investigation. But my medical administration license is revoked permanently." I nodded. "And Denning?" 15 years federal prison. The pharmaceutical company he was working with doesn't exist. He was selling the research data to multiple buyers, including some overseas companies the FDA is very interested in. "Good." She stood there for a long moment, looking like she wanted to say something important. Finally, she spoke. "Tyler wants to live with you full time. I'm not going to fight it. Probably for the best. He needs stability right now. Callum, I know you'll never forgive me for what I did, but I need you to know that the medication, it changed how I thought about everything. It made things that should have seemed wrong feel acceptable, even exciting. I know, I read the research. Does that make any difference?" I looked at my wife, my ex-wife, technically, since the divorce had been finalized last month, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just empty space where 15 years of marriage used to be. "No," I said. "It doesn't." She nodded like she'd expected that answer. "What will you do now?" "I'm thinking about becoming a private investigator. Frank Martinez offered me a partnership. Turns out I have a talent for uncovering secrets. And me? What am I supposed to do?" I started my truck and put it in gear. "That's not my problem anymore, Jillian. You made your choices, and now you get to live with them." As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of her in my rearview mirror, standing alone in the courthouse parking lot with nowhere to go and no one to call. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the 8 other women Denning had victimized, the months of lies and manipulation, and the look on Tyler's face when he'd learned the truth about his mother. The feeling passed. That evening, Tyler and I had dinner at Murphy's Diner, the same place where Lisa Chen had confessed her part in the conspiracy 6 months earlier. Lisa had disappeared after testifying for the federal prosecutors, and rumor had it she'd moved to Oregon to start over. "Dad," Tyler said over his burger, "do you think Mom will be okay? Your mother is smart and resourceful. She'll figure something out. But do you think she'll be okay?" I looked at my son. Almost 18 now, preparing for college, trying to make sense of how his family had imploded. He deserved an honest answer. "I think your mother will survive," I said. "Whether she'll be happy or not depends on whether she learns from this experience or just finds new ways to blame other people for her choices." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "I hope she learns." "Me too, son. Me too." But as I sat there watching my son eat his dinner and plan his future, I realized I didn't really care whether Jillian learned anything or not. She was no longer my responsibility, no longer my problem, no longer part of my life in any meaningful way. For the first time in months, that felt like freedom. Outside the diner window, the sun was setting over our small town, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new possibilities. I was looking forward to all of them.